Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberker. Negotiators from Ukraine and Russia met in Istanbul, aiming to bring their 5-week conflict to some sort of close. But no agreements were reached, despite Kyiv offering up a series of proposals. Topping the list were pledges to not join military alliances, host foreign troops, or acquire nuclear weapons. But Ukrainian negotiators added that several countries would have to guarantee its security. Meanwhile, Russia appears to have lowered its overall expectations in Ukraine, saying it will cut back its military activity near Kyiv and Chernihiv, two cities that have put up fierce resistance. But Ukrainian officials said Russian attacks were ongoing in many of those areas. The peace talks in Istanbul come just 3 weeks after the foreign ministers of Ukraine and Russia met in Antalya. Maintaining its neutral and balanced stance, Türkiye is pushing diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the conflict in Ukraine, having urged all sides to exercise restraint. And to discuss the latest developments in Ukraine, I'm joined now from near Lviv by Iliya Kusa. He is an international relations analyst at the Ukrainian Institute for the Future. And in Brussels is Amanda Paul, a senior policy analyst at the European Policy Center. A warm welcome to you both, and thanks for joining me on Straight Talk. So, Amanda, first face-to-face talks between Russian and Ukrainian officials were held in Istanbul this week, and Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu said a significant progress was made during the talks in Istanbul. What kind of a progress we're talking about here?
I mean, I'm not sure we could define what happened as significant progress. I mean, I think it's good that these talks are ongoing. Turkey's doing an important job and is uniquely placed to do that. But I think that it's really too early to talk about genuine progress in these talks, frankly speaking. We shouldn't be having any sort of wishful thinking. The Russians are still carrying out atrocities on the ground every day, every night, striking cities, killing civilians. So the process needs to keep going, but we need to be realistic that there's a long way to go.
So, Iliya, what's your take on the latest negotiations in Istanbul? Although the sides announced there were no major breakthroughs made during the negotiations, but what was actually achieved? What was the significance of these talks?
Well, I agree that really we can't talk right now about some kind of draft agreement or any agreement that is going to be signed in the coming days. So we only heard an idea, which is something connected, related to neutrality of Ukraine under foreign guarantees. But really, everything else is just an idea, because everything will depend on the military situation on the ground, where it's still dynamic, it's still changing. There is no ceasefire in place, and it will also depend on the security guarantees as at their essence. I mean, what will be written in these security guarantees, and will the countries guarantors of Ukraine's security will sign it? I mean, will be able to sign them.
It seems like Russia has dropped some of its key demands, for example, by scaling down its military operations near Kyiv. Is that correct, Iliya? Has it scaled down?
Yes, as of today, Russians withdrew their forces from around Kyiv, from northwestern, western, and eastern suburbs, and we expect them to withdraw from all Kyiv region and maybe neighboring Chernihiv region. It's the northern territories of Ukraine in the coming days. At least this is what happened today. So now they are moving eastwards toward the eastern front, which, as it is believed, they will concentrate their forces there and their battle also.
So, Amanda, can we say Russia is softening its position?
I wouldn't say that, despite the fact that the Russians seem to be withdrawing. It could be that they're also preparing for another sort of offensive. So you can't really take anything at its word. So I think it's correct that Ukraine stays, on full alert and expects every single option that could continue to arise, because the Russians simply cannot be trusted.
So there have been reports, Iliya, that 2 Ukrainian attack helicopters pounded an oil depot in Russia on the Ukraine border. Is Ukraine raising stakes, and will the fighting intensify in the coming days?
Yes, of course. I think this was one of steps necessary for Ukraine to show that Ukraine is able to hit targets on Russian territory, because till this moment, Russians were sure that we don't have resources to hit their territory, to bring war to their territory. But of course, I think that this also connected to the fact that I believe the battles will intensify in the coming days and weeks. As I said, Russians are consolidating their forces in northeastern and eastern regions of Ukraine, and I think those regions will be the epicenter of battles in the coming weeks.
So, Amanda, Ukrainian President Zelensky has said the issue of neutrality and agreeing to stay out of NATO could be put to Ukrainian voters in a referendum. How risky is this move, and what if the Ukrainians say no?
I mean, of course, there is a risk attached to that, but I mean, I personally believe it's the right thing to do, because there needs to be an element of legitimacy and support from the Ukrainian nation for this decision. I mean, obviously, if the result is no, I mean, that will have implications. But I believe, we need to wait till we get to that point to actually deal with it. It depends as well how it's sold. What are the conditions? We're talking as well about a much bigger picture here, security guarantees, because there needs to be these security guarantees. Otherwise, such an agreement is not worth the paper it's written on, based on, the Budapest Memorandum and whatnot.
So do you believe that those countries, mostly Western countries, are willing to give Ukraine the security guarantees it asked for?
I mean, I haven't seen a country step up yet and put itself forward, but it's something that needs to be done. It has to be done, because there is going to be no settlement without security guarantees. I mean, Ukraine cannot be put in a position where at any moment the Russians are going to come over the border again. This is clear.
Iliya, what do you make of the West's position? Is it really doing enough to support Ukraine and deter Russia by sanctioning it? Is it enough?
Well, I think it is enough for them. I mean, because we need to understand that there are interests of Western countries, of the United States, for example, which are more interested in dragging this war on because they want Russia to be weakened, in long-term perspective, not only now. But of course, from Ukraine's perspective, it's not the best option, because we want this war to stop at some point. There is no resources to, wage this war for like years and years. So I think that Western countries, they build up their policies according to their own interests, not only because Ukraine wants something, but of course, Ukrainian government is trying to do their best to now request more assistance, and this means that, because for now, for example, Ukraine needs anti-aircraft systems to balance, militarily balance our struggle with Russia, because they have planes, plenty of them, and they have advantage in the sky.
So, Amanda, since Russia immediately shut down our Ukrainian proposal to discuss the future of Donbas and Crimea, how could this impasse be resolved, and how will Ukraine protect its territorial integrity under such circumstances?
I mean, just because the Russians, try to shut down a conversation, doesn't mean that's the end of the story, because this is not the point. The status of Donbas, I mean, Donbas is part of Ukraine's sovereign territory, and it's going to remain on the table going forward, and it needs to be part of any future peace settlement. This is clear.
So, Iliya, Ukraine, the Russian-backed self-proclaimed Donetsk, has said it will consider joining Russia once it takes control of the region. And almost simultaneously, South Ossetia announces it is also looking to hold a referendum for the same purpose. What kind of political implications we're likely to see in the broader region? And is the Caucasus poised for new crisis?
Well, of course, I mean, these kind of decisions, they can actually make it more difficult for Ukraine, particularly to reintegrate occupied territories, which were occupied since 2014. Because for now, for example, when the peace talks were going on in Istanbul, it was clear from the statements made by both Ukrainian and Russian delegations that there is no solution right now on how to resolve questions related to territories of Ukraine which were occupied in 2014, so Crimea and parts of Donbass that was occupied by Russians in 2014. And I think this is something that Russia is trying to do. They are trying to make it impossible in the future to reintegrate these territories by making them part of Russia, as they made with Crimea. Mm-hmm. And of course, this is something that I think they're trying to do by cementing their political influence in the region. And also this will be useful for Vladimir Putin to say to his own citizens that, look, we joined, there are some territories joined with us. That's why we're victorious. So it's not, yes, we did lose, we won.
Yeah, it seems his approval ratings reached highest level in 5 years. Apparently, 83% of Russians approve Mr. Putin's actions in Ukraine. So, Amanda, next round of negotiations are expected to be held within 2 weeks. What should be expected in the meantime?
I mean, what I would like to see in the meantime is ongoing support, strong support from the West to Ukraine, that more arms are delivered to Ukraine, because Ukraine has been very successful on the ground, but this takes a lot of, military equipment. Ukraine needs far more offensive weapons to be able to successfully continue to push back the Russians. So to keep focused on this and to further step up the sanctions on Russia, bring in the oil and gas embargo, because this is crucial. I mean, every day Europe is paying 500 million euros to the Russians because of their oil and gas purchases. So we need to keep up the pressure while having the track of negotiations going on at the same time. There's absolutely no space for complacency here.
All right, Amanda, Iliya, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.